So this is the iPhone 15 Pro, which I've been using for well over a year now. Great phone, great camera, lots of new features when it came out. Apple ProRes, the new titanium finish, action button, and not too many complaints, to be honest. And this is a 16 Pro, which I've been using for about 2 months as my daily phone, and it is pretty much everything the 15 Pro has. I mean, if you take a look, you can hardly tell the difference between the two. The only difference physically is the slightly larger display and the camera control feature on the side, which we'll go over in this video. But I also wanted to share my experience of using the 16 Pro so far. Is the camera significantly better than the 15 Pro? What's good and bad about the 16 Pro? Has there been any improvement in battery life? And is it worth upgrading to the 16 Pro at all? So let's start with cameras or photos. Are the photos taken on the 16 Pro significantly better than the 15 Pro? Personally, I don't think so. I think it's more or less the same, maybe a fraction better, but nothing significantly noticeable or different in my view. It takes pretty good photos, just like the 15 Pro. The new 5x zoom is nice on the 16 Pro, but I tend not to use it that often. In fact, I miss and prefer the 3x zoom button on the 15 Pro. I find myself using the 3x more than the 5x. You might be different. The only way now you can get to that 3x zoom is to manually adjust the zoom, which can be a tad annoying and not as convenient as that 3x button you get on the 15 Pro. But what I do like about the 16 Pro are those additional ProRAW formats you get. Rather than a whopping 75 meg file for a RAW file, you can get what I think pretty good raw image results for about 20 megs, which is about a quarter of the size, if you use that new JPEG XL lossy compression format. And what about the wide angle, that new 48 megapixel wide angle camera? I mean, it's good. I have to say the 15 Pro wide angle camera wasn't that bad either. And looking at the 16 Pro images, they look very similar to the 15 Pro. Again, it's not a startling difference in the wide angle between the two, so I don't think you'll be missing out too much with the 16 Pro cameras. But what I do like about the 16 Pro is the new photographic styles. I prefer them over the standard filters because you have a bit more playroom and control on how you style your photos. But it's only available when photos are taken in HEIF format. And funny thing, check this out. This is the 15 Pro, and hopefully I get this on camera. And will you look at that? Photographic styles. How, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you how. It's because this photo was taken on the 16 Pro. So it seems that the 15 Pro is capable of applying photographic styles, as you can see, but the lock-in seems like only photos taken with the 16, which is a shame because it seems that the 15 Pro is more than capable, and it appears it's a software lock-in rather than hardware, which is a shame. Now, what about camera control? Is it life-changing? Is it that useful when taking photos? Well, just like the action button, I found myself not using it that much. I sometimes use it for launching the camera, and that's about it. I don't even use it for taking a photo. And there are a couple of reasons why. Number one is ergonomics. I think the camera control button location is too far in. And I think it should be lower towards the corner of the phone because it'll make it easier for your forefinger to reach. But if it's too far down, it'll make the button not very usable when it comes to portrait mode, when it comes to using Apple Intelligence. So it's placed in a difficult position, and just the overall use of getting that activation click when navigating the controls and scrolling is a bit finicky at times. The second reason is speed. I find it easier just to use the touchscreen to access the camera settings. It's literally right there. When I find myself using tap to focus on the camera whilst you're at it, you might as well just use the camera shutter button on the touchscreen. And number three is taking the photo itself. Every time I press the activation, I find myself pressing quite hard just to get that click. And every time I find myself doing that, I tend to move the phone a bit. I'm exaggerating here. And I fear that it just may result in a blurry photo. You might be different. You might find it great to use, and that's great. But I think the touchscreen controls were absolutely fine on the iPhone. There was never a real problem, and the camera control is a nice feature to have. And depending on your use case and how you take your photos, you may or may end up not using the camera button that often. Now, when I first got the 16 Pro, I noticed it was larger and heavier than the 15 Pro. And on paper, it does confirm that. I was a little bit annoyed because the Pro itself is already heavy compared to the standard iPhone itself. And each time I go back to the 15 Pro, like now, it's just so much better ergonomically in the hand. And the 15 Pro feels nicer for single-handed use because of that reduced weight and width. I know everyone is different, and you may say that I have small hands, and yeah, that might be true, but it's a shame Apple didn't make any improvements on the weight or size aspect, or at least kept the same size and perhaps the weight, or maybe just reducing it. And I hope Apple doesn't constantly keep increasing the size and weight by a few millimeters or grams each year. And then not only will you have an incremental iPhone, but also a larger and bulkier one. Now there is one slight advantage to the larger 16 Pro, and that's the larger screen. And you get that extra little space, and hopefully I can demonstrate with this web page. And you can see here, you get a little bit more reading space. Now, if you are watching a video or something, it's not that noticeable, but 16 Pro has a wider viewing angle than the 15 Pro, but only by a fraction. Is it life-changing and going to change your viewing experience? Probably not, but you have it anyway. Now, what about battery life? Apple quotes you get 5 more extra hours when it comes to video playback. Well, how has it been like in reality? Well, I've not noticed a battery improvement when compared to the 15 Pro. It feels just like the same as 15 Pro, nothing noticeable, but maybe it's doing something behind the scenes. But my just general day-to-day use, for me, very similar to the 15 Pro. I've not seen any significant gains. You may experience something different. I get a full day's battery life. I started with 80%, yes. I know that's weird, but if you've watched my previous videos about iPhone battery life, it would make a bit more sense. And at the end of the day, I have around anywhere between 20 and 40%. And with iOS 18, you can even have more finer grained battery level control charge if you want to change your charging levels on your phone. But aside from battery, there is something I did notice with 16 Pro, and it tends to heat up. Well, the 15 Pro did. There were sometimes I used the MagSafe battery bank, but with 16 Pro, it was something else. And that something else came to using the new Apple Intelligence cleanup feature, which is great, by the way. You can remove things that you don't want. And this isn't anything new. Google have this with the Magic Eraser. I'll get into that a bit more later. But after using it for a bit, I found the 16 Pro getting slightly warm on the back of the phone. I thought it was something else, coincidence, but I did notice it consistently when using the cleanup feature. And when I stopped using it, the phone would cool back down. I do hope Apple resolve this in the future. But that aside, the cleanup feature is pretty useful. It's neat. It's not always accurate, but I think it's pretty decent. I think the way it works is it tries to clone existing areas of photo to fill in what you want to erase. Sometimes it gets it right, other times it doesn't get it quite right. And you will find this in popular desktop editing photo applications as well. It's just that with the iPhone 16, it just is baked in. It works pretty well if the background of the photo isn't too complex and have many layers, and it does a pretty good job on identifying potential objects you want to remove with its highlighting feature. And I can imagine over time, well, hopefully over time, software updates, it will improve over time and not make the phone heat up so much. And this feature is not exclusive to the 16 Pro, it is available on 18.1, and you get it on the iPhone 15 Pro as well. Now, also ran benchmark tests on both phones. I'm not a huge fan of running these kind of tests, but I just want to demonstrate how performant the new 18 Pro chip compared to the A17 Pro. And yeah, it is indeed quicker and more performant on paper. In practical terms and everyday use, I didn't notice it too much difference between the two phones. I am running 18.1 on both phones currently, and performance has been fine. Maybe gaming, if you're playing any intense gaming, you may have some performance gains and maybe photo editing, but general day-to-day, I didn't notice much of a difference. The 15 Pro was pretty performant anyway. Only if you're coming from a much older generation phone, I think you'll notice the performance bump. So in summary, is the iPhone 16 Pro better than the 15 Pro? Yes, on paper and practical terms, ever so slightly. Is it worth upgrading from the 15 Pro to the 16 Pro? For most people, I think you can skip it. I mean, I could have skipped it. The only reason I got the 16 Pro was literally to do a YouTube video. I could have easily stuck with the 15 Pro. The 15 Pro is a great phone. I think Apple have tried very hard to make the 16 Pro better than the 15 Pro. It's a tough phone to beat. I think it's more appealing for those upgrading from a much older generation, and it's not aimed at the 15 Pro or 15 users. I think those days of upgrading your phone each year are pretty much gone. The 16 Pro feels an incremental update. It feels like a 15 Pro S rather than a 15 Pro, if that makes sense. Do I miss the 15 Pro? Yes, I do. I miss the size and weight of the 15 Pro and the convenience of that 3x zoom. So if you don't care too much about photographic styles, camera control, 5x zoom, and the new features on the 16 Pro, get the 15 Pro whilst you can. You'll probably find it cheaper as well. But if you are in the market for a new phone and you're upgrading from a very old phone, then I don't think the 16 Pro is going to disappoint you. Alright, thanks for watching. Hope you found it useful and entertaining. See you in the next one.